Welcome to the PROCON podcast, hosted by Paul Vogels, with expert guest interviews, case study reviews, and insightful discussion topics. The PROCON podcast leads the project controls conversation.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of the PROCON podcast. We are leading the project controls conversation, and today we have a very special episode. I'm just here by myself, but hang on tight. We have two special guests today. One is Anil Godhawale, founder of the Project Controls Expo, and the other one is Phil Shatz, a old-time expert in the project controls area. I'm going to introduce those guys later, but first let me tell you what today's episode is all about. In this podcasting series, we're talking about use cases, educational tracks, and software specials. And today we are reviewing the Project Controls Expo UK 2021. A live event, physical event, live at the Wembley Stadium in the UK, in London, since almost 2 years. Last year and the year before, we had a virtual one, but this year there was a live physical one again. And we, as the PROCON podcast, have visited that exposition. It's a big event, almost more than 1,200 people attending live and also virtual, of course, to this event to look at the latest trends in project controls. We have the founder of this Project Controls Exposition in a couple of minutes on the show to talk about the latest 10 years he has been experienced with the Expo, because it's a 10-year anniversary this year actually. And Phil Shatz, one of the use cases we have on board. So it's a use case, it's a software special, it's a very special podcast today. So we have visited that exposition, and why are we visiting and exhibiting as well regularly on this event is to look at the community, to look at the latest trends. It's about people, it's about processes, and it's about tools. And a couple of years ago when we started, it was more industry focused, more software focused. But what surprisingly, we are very glad that this last session was as broad as it gets. From the initiative phase all the way to the closeout, remote censoring, scheduling, of course, risk, managed hosted, big guys, upcoming challenges, everybody was there. There was an academy, there was a college, there was a software vendor, there were all the big names of software vendors at this stage. There were consulting firms, there were coaches, there were whatever there is. Everybody was back and glad to be back. So what we as PROCON podcast, but also from the Primanet point of view, we are the project controls industry in leaders in the Benelux, in Germany, UK, Ireland nowadays. What we are very happy to see that there are still many use cases to be shared. We have been listening, for example, and I found this a very interesting use case we have been seeing. A big LAX airport, Los Angeles, one of the biggest, if you look at it from a mass perspective. It has the biggest square meters, if you want to call it that way, on an airport, and they are transforming. They are changing from a spoke and wheel point of view to a linear asset, and with some software, and it was helped by a very good software vendor from the US. They have been looking at this common data environment, and common data environments, I think, is a new trend, or is the new golden nugget in project controls. The common data environment, and from a conceptual point of view, we're not talking about specific vendors, but from a conceptual point of view, there is one repository where all data comes into one place and is going to be synchronized with each other. So there's a scheduling component, there is a risk component, there is a document management component. All knowledge areas are included in this common data environment. And with business intelligence, we talked about in the previous podcast about project intelligence, we are going to drill into this environment with data to deliver Project Insight. And the LAX airport we have seen was a very interesting use case because what they have been doing was a major success. They could do simulations. There's a digital twin. All changes are implemented as they arise. They are well documented. The as-built situation was documented as good as well as the first design phase. Because that's also a new trend we are seeing. When project control started years ago, decades ago at the end, people were focusing more on the executional phase, on the construction phase of a project. But the data going in from the initiative, the business case, the value, if you want to call it that way, all the way up to the closeout and commissioning and maintaining of it is as important as digging the hole or making the tarmac. So a couple of trends we have been experienced the last couple of years, and I think in the Project Controls Expo 2021 in the Wembley Stadium, they all came together. And I think to look at this expo, and maybe it's a good time to try to call in Anil Godhawale for now to ask how did the Project Controls Expo change in the last 10 years? And it's following the market at the end, of course. It's following the community. So let's talk to Anil and hear what he is saying. And Anil is the founder of the Project Controls. He's one of the heroes, one of the leaders who started this expo, actually. So let's dial up with Anil. So thank you, Anil, to be on the show. Guests, listeners, thank you very much for staying tuned with us in this new podcast on the Project Controls Expo review. We have a very special guest, Anil Godhawale, the founder of the Project Controls Expo, PCE. Last week, 2 weeks ago, the Project Controls Expo was live again at the UK, at the Wembley Stadium. It was virtual this year due to all the changes in COVID, etc. But the Project Controls Exposition, Anil, grew. It's your 10th year anniversary. Congratulations on that. Yep. It grew from a modest, a good event to a worldwide, I think, leading project controls event in all continents. So, Anil, again, thank you for being on the show. What was your first experience when you wake up Wednesday morning after the event? What was your first mind?
Whether I will be able to pull it through, because there was a lot of uncertainty going on. Just during the overnight, there were lots of cancellations because people were having some COVID symptoms, and there were requests for swapping the ticket. So there was a lot of uncertainty, what the numbers are going to look like. And there was a lot of anxiety, I would suggest, because although we did all the risk management, we did have all the contingency planning into the place, but it could fall apart like a pack of cards, if things really get escalated. So the uncertainty and anxiety was the one, actually, I would say, although we were excited at the same time because we were able to hold this physically, especially after last 24 turbulent months.
Yep.
So it was a mixed feeling, an excitement, nervousness, and anxiety. So, but eventually, as we all know, it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, because I was there at your opening speech. Project Controls is the new rock and roll. That's the theme we did this year. A big milestone, 10 years of this event. Yes. When I was walking around on Tuesday and even on Wednesday, I've met friends and colleagues, etc. Monday evening, a big award show. A lot of your use cases were awarded on the big achievement. Yes. At the end, everybody who was there physically was very excited. We're happy to see each other with all measurements and infections and distancing, etc. I think the people who made it to the Wembley Stadium were excited and enthusiastic about it. A lot of people, I think, I don't know the actual number who were there in the stadium, but hundreds of people at least, and multiple times online even, because we're moving into a hybrid world.
Yep.
Any feedback? Were people telling you, well, I'm really glad we came back to this exposition?
True. I mean, the thing is, we had total unique registrations. We total 1,200 plus unique registrations. So some of them were for both parts of the day, or some were only for the one part of the day. Some came only just for the workshop. So there were multiple elements of the event. So and this was a hybrid event, as you know. So there was a lot of people who were also attending it virtually. And most interestingly, there was a lot of continents who were participating in this event.
Yep.
Some of the far locations were also accessing this event. And the geographical spread was very impressive, and I was really, really pleased to see that. The feedback has been is astonishing. Actually, we just recently ran a survey, which we always do after our event, and the initial results. And of course, we didn't get loads of responses, but we still got enough for us to understand where the trend is going. And the trend is only showing us that the people were very happy. They were really, really glad to meet up. They would like kind of dying to see each other. And they made every effort to be there. Lateral flow test, making sure they are in the good condition. They don't have any symptoms and stuff like that. So I think the feedback has been excellent. We experimented a lot of things this year. Like this is the first time we had the 2-day event rather than the 1-day event. And this is the first time we did the workshops. This is the first time we were giving a free access to the partner showcase so that people can come and meet with the relevant industry suppliers. So there was a lot of experiments we did this year, and I think everything worked out very well. There were few lessons learned, which is not a surprise and which will always be there.
That's our profession in project controls. We need to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So we are going to incorporate that. And but I think the overall response which I'm getting right now, the LinkedIn is flooded. I mean, I don't need to say, don't need to go by my words. LinkedIn is flooded. People are really singing that project controls is a new rock and roll as an anthem. And they are glamorizing it. They're finding it extremely useful to promote the project controls as a profession within the business and across the community. So I think it has been phenomenal. All the new things which we incorporated has worked out pretty well. So I think it has been really great. The experience has been great. We can only make it even better next year. There is a lot of actions we are taking as we speak. And we look forward to the next one already, actually.
Because you grew in the last 10 years, and I think running 10 years consecutively on a project controls, which is still a niche market in our industry. It's not a profession by everybody. You believe it, we believe it, all the participants believe it, but well, there are a lot of people who don't see it as an actual profession yet. Growing from a good event to the scale you are doing in 2021, and even if we have the preview, which you showed on the screen, 2022, 4 physical events, US, Australia, Malaysia, and the UK, and a virtual one. That's every other month there is an event. When we were back in we're still facing the risks of COVID. I talked to people from, I think all continents last week, and I can imagine among those 1,200 participants, everybody was represented. Australia, US, Asia, EMEA, everybody was there. Is there a trend you're seeing? Because you've expanded and you put project controls on the map. I think the Project Controls Expo is the #1 exposition on project controls. Do you see a trend in I've seen your picture from 10 years ago on this, when you were just a little boy to,
a kid,
just a kid, say, well, let's do an event to where are we now? Can you see like a trend, like a professionalization? What's your view on the last 10 years?
Oh, well, the awareness has gone up significantly. I mean, when I started this Project Controls Expo, I predominantly came from oil and gas industry.
Yep.
So I started my career in oil and gas, so which is where Project Controls was very matured. And that is when like 10 years back, when I was interacting with the wider community, I realized that the awareness is very limited to ONG. The other industries were shying away from it, or there was not so much of acceptability around it.
Yep.
Maybe call it a cost reasons or awareness reasons or whatever, XYZ. But in last 10 years, one drastic change I have seen is the acceptance, maturity, and consistent understanding of project controls.
Yep.
So now, if you think about infrastructure projects, the government projects, the defense, the nuclear, any construction project, they all are now applying the principles of project controls.
Yep.
They have the project controls professional working in these projects. So I think the massive change has happened in terms of awareness, and the overall maturity has gone up considerably.
Yep.
The professionalism also has occurred to a large extent, especially since when we drafted the qualifications, the diploma qualification and degree qualification in project controls.
Yep.
We didn't have that. Once you have a qualification, then it's a first stepping stone for professionalizing it. Then we acknowledge that this is a subject. We acknowledge that this can be translated into a profession.
Yep.
So yeah, there is a significant improvement in accepting this as a subject, and there's a growing awareness on it and the wider industry participation in it.
Yeah.
So that has definitely happened, and many other regions globally are catching up. And I think that was the biggest change or the trend, I would say.
Yeah, and that's what you literally are seeing right now, because the awareness is, I think, the key to the acceptance of project controls. When I walked around at Wembley Stadium, you grew out of the Arsenal Stadium. It was too small. We need more room. We are going to the Wembley Stadium, the National Football Stadium in the UK. There were, and we're not going to call out names, but there were people from formal educational platforms. There were scheduling software vendors, but also document, BI, BIM. I've seen the complete span of people, processes and tools, which is in fact the acceptance of project control. So project control started from scheduling in oil and gas to where are we now with common data environments, with 4D, 5D, 6D, with a college being one of the participants, being if you see the greatness and the broadness of the participants, of the speakers, of the professionals, of the exhibitors, well, that's great. Do you think there's room to improve? If we're going to talk 10 years, I'm a boy, and when I grow up, and when you have grown up even more, and maybe even bigger beard, where are we going to be in 5 years or 10 years? Is there a vision in the Project Controls Expo team to say, okay, we want to be here?
So yeah, definitely. The thing is, yes, as you rightly said, there was an entire supply chain there, from the end clients to consulting to the technology companies to the academia, which and the college you referred, and the professional bodies, of course. So the whole of supply chain is there. And I think the drive is coming from the government, which is from the top side. A lot of end clients are enforcing project controls. And I think that will continue to happen. At the moment, the focus is on a limited industries from the government side, but I think that's coming to the wider industry. So that's something which will happen in next 10 years.
Yep.
I think the way we manage project and the way we manage data in next 10 years is going to change. So the vision of the Project Controls Expo, if I have to look at it, is it might be focused more on the tech side going forward. How do we apply the technology to improve our project controls processes? That's one side. At the same time, we need to look into how our processes are going to be evolved, how the understanding of project controls is going to be evolved in next 10 years, and how the profession is going to further grow from here. So at the moment, it is still a black box for many. The only thing we know is the tech is going to lead it, but how it is going to shape up the future of project controls is still unknown for many. There are a lot of theories around, and we can make some assumptions, but it may not be wise to do so here.
Yep.
But yes, if you talk about the vision for the Expo in 10 years down the line, I think the greater maturity, because that journey is pretty long journey. We have crossed a large part of it already, but there's still a long way to go in terms of maturity. There is still a lot of, I think I would say, consistent understanding still required across many other industries.
Yep. We're just starting in the growing curve.
Exactly. So I think the maturity, understanding, and the professionalism will continue to grow. The end state vision, if I have to look at it, is that everyone see project controls as one thing. They don't understand or interpret in different ways, number one.
Yep.
Number two, they actually apply the principles in the way it has been agreed across the industry and as mandated by the government. So mandating by the government could be something which could be happening in next 10 years.
Yep.
So the IPAs are drafting a lot of frameworks and the delivery models for a lot of organizations. And I believe that is going to be something which you're going to see in the next 10 years. So more and more push from the government to bring the industry together and accept project controls as a profession, and continuous maturity is something which you're going to see in next 10 years. But again, Expo is not limited to the UK.
No.
If I look at 10 years vision, I look at it on the global scale.
Yep.
There's a lot of economies globally, especially the developing economies. They are behind than some of the nations.
But they can learn from the rest.
Yeah, they're going to learn from the rest of the nations, who are slightly ahead.
Yep.
And I think so they will be catching up. And the intention of Project Controls Expo is to have a global footprint, not limiting ourselves into a few of the regions. So the 10 years down the line, I expect Project Controls Expo to be happening at 8 or 9 locations in the world, number one.
Yep.
And the UK will continue to experiment what we are doing and then apply those successful experiences into the other events and bring the other events to the same level where we are at the UK at the moment.
Yeah.
So that is what I would say in the next 10 years we would like to be achieving.
Yeah, and I think that to close up this conversation is, I think the bigger maturity level, the greater maturity level with this model, and we don't need to be humble about it, but you're going to the US next year. You're already there in Malaysia. You're already there in Australia and in the UK, European continent. And there are few continents which are not covered yet, but well, that's, I think, a challenge for the next years. And I think the PROCON podcast has leading the project controls conversation as a tagline. I think by a virtual and physical combination, that's where it's not theoretical anymore. It's the proof of the pudding is by eating it, and boy, have you eaten the pudding at the end. So I think to wrap up this, I think this Project Controls Expo is a good platform, is the best platform to talk to each other, to learn cross industries, cross continents.
Yes.
But also cross maturity levels, because when we started participating 4 or 5 years ago, and where we are right now, as a company, as a professional body, as government organization, well, the growth is we are down the line. We are in the hockey curve. We say in the Netherlands. So great job. Congratulations on your 10th year anniversary. Let's go for the next anniversary where we can party again. Thank you very much for participating in our podcast. Thank you very much, Anil Godhawale, founder of the Project Controls Exposition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
So thank you for that, Anil, and back into the studio. And as mentioned, we had a very special guest, and Anil was on stage, and it was a Tuesday morning 2 weeks ago, early 9 o'clock. And there's an award show on Monday, so the event spreads out on 2 days. Day one is a workshop, which is more or less the educational track of the Project Controls Expo. Day one evening, there's always an award session, and that's something to recognize our project controls professional. We've been participating in this award show many times. and well, there's always a little party. So Tuesday morning is always speeding up slowly. People are traveling in. So in this speech, Anil was telling about the history he has with the Project Controls Expo, with the PCE 2021, literally growing out of the facilitations he had. So the last UK physical one was in Arsenal Stadium, which is a big event, but it's too small for the next session. So 2020, which unfortunately has been cancelled due to COVID, should have been in the Wembley Stadium. This year actually was in the Wembley Stadium, and it's, I think, 50, 60, 70% bigger, but it was crowded on a safe way. Let's make sure no risk are taken, but it was crowded in a very positive way. And he was sharing this story. He was, well, just a rookie, young guy 10 years ago, starting this initiative to give a voice to the people. And that's where the Project Controls community has a real big need for. And for example, with this PROCON podcast, with this PCE UK versions, Malaysia reaching out to Washington next year. There are 4 or 5 continents in the planning to do this PCE expositions. And our second guest, which will come in a couple of minutes later in this podcast, is also one of those guys who gives the voice to our Project Controls professionals, because there are a lot of Project Controls professionals in the world, and it is a profession, and we are just spreading the word, leading the Project Controls conversation. To go back to this keynote speech of Anil, he ended up, well, guys, Project Controls, and that's the anthem of this PCE. Project Controls is the new rock and roll, which is trying to bring this, well, more or less dusty, old-fashioned, not old-fashioned in a bad way, but a traditional way of Project Controls. It's getting more and more hip and happening. Artificial intelligence, cloud infrastructures, managed hosting solutions, SaaS solutions. There is this real-life construction laboratory in the middle of England. There's also one in the UK, in the USA, where they are testing sensorized robots, sensorized pneumatic drills, drone surveys, etc. This is 2021, people, where tools are helping facilitating our project controls, where quantity surveyors need to go out and count the physical progress. For example, years ago, now a drone flies over a building and sees, okay, this is built, this is not built, this is ready to be concreted, this is ready to be painted, etc. So the digital transformation, which is not a technology, which is a mindset, but is driven or is catalyzed by solutions. And that's also one of the remarks I want to make, that on this Project Controls Expo, a lot of the big guys in the technology sector are there. The big names, and we all know who are the big games in the construction and engineering global business unit or in the industry. It's the Oracle, it's the Hexagons, it's Safran, it's Ecosys. These guys, Bentley, if you look at BIM, for example, are there to stay. These are the big guys. But also some other companies surrounding those solution vendors, like, for example, Loadspringer, which is the Project Controls data center platform managed hosting party we are working with a lot in Europe, in the USA. It's a global company, is there to facilitate and to drive these well, let's say traditional vendors. So the big guys are there. The facilitators are there, and not just from a technology point of view, but also from different point of views. But also some new guys who have Power BI add-ins, who have artificial intelligence scripting, etc. There are a lot of promotional guys, of course, on the Project Controls Expo, because well, it needs to be paid at the end, and I assume the Wembley Stadium isn't cheap. Look at the website at projectcontrolexpo.com, where you can see all the guys who chip in for this event. And we are not promoting it because we get paid by it, but we really believe in this platform. That's why I'm helping out to Anil and friends. The technology is changing, and they are taking up a really good pace in this. And one other use case I remember from the Project Controls Expo was about a solar farm who is building out solar platforms in Europe, adopting a new tool from Oracle. It's the best of breed SaaS solution at the end from their stack of solutions. It's called Oracle Primavera Cloud. And there was also some OPC blogs and podcasts on that. But with OPC is the concrete experience of the traditional well-proven technology like P6, OPRA, etc., moved into the SaaS solution, and they actually implemented it. And they implemented it very collaborative. So the whole community was working on there, people from purchasing, people from logistics, project by project, country by country, with a real speediness of implementing, where the people and the processes are in place, are encouraged to take part. And this guy, the CIO, really not IT lookalike in my case, a really nice guy to chat to. He's an Irishman, and he had this very interesting story with a very short TCO. The total cost of ownership was not that big, relatively big, short ROI. So by this facilitating software solutions, the people and the processes get facilitated very quickly and implement very quickly. And it takes them in a place where they can buy or acquire new solar plants or build new solar plants at the end. And that was also very interesting story. They're supported by a local Oracle partner from the UK. A solid partner as well from the Project Controls Expo, but also from Oracle point of view, and that was very interesting. One other topic I was finding very interesting was, for example, on risk. The people are more risk aware right now, and awareness is, I also think, a trend in project controls, and by giving insights into new solutions, and for example into a new risk solution by another vendor called Safran. It's a Nordic vendor. It's very interesting to see how vendors can promote the adaptation of digital transformation, and not saying that digital transformation is a tool, it's a mindset, but it's about people, processes, and tools, as we say in the end. And I think it's time to dial into our next guest. And my next guest is I have a lot of business friends who are also a business partner from the PROCON podcast in this case, but who also are very nice guys to talk to. And I think that's also a project controls thing. We all like to talk to each other. We all find each other very nice to talk to, and everybody knows each other because it's such a niche market. It's such a small community at the end. Everybody is fan of the rock and roll. So I'm gonna dial in Phil Shatz in a minute. Phil has been working in software and in solutions for ages, for more than 35 years. He will say probably, but also in a consulting role. So he has been a end user and implementing and in support of the end and the key users. So Phil, I believe, has a very strong vision on project controls. Is a youngster, he's almost turning 60, but he has a clear vision or a clear insight in how the technology has been changing, but also on the use cases being helped by this. And he has this platform, Glimpse of the Future, broadcasters on YouTube and many other channels where people from all over the world have literally a glimpse, and the glimpse in this case is 15 minutes of use cases. So there's a 15-minute use case. For example, we presented it last year on Carl Zeiss, on different customers, on different use cases from the UK, from Europe, from USA, from all over the world. And by people giving other project professionals this platform, we get a glimpse of the future, after Project Controls Future. So let's dial up with Phil Shatz. So listeners, viewers, thank you for sticking with us. I have a new guest on the podcast today, and it's Phil Shatz. And Phil is among and many other things I'm going to announce a little bit later. But Phil is the founder of the Glimpse of the Future. So we're talking about the Project Controls Expo today here in the PROCON podcast studio, and I really want to have some end user perspective on this. Earlier this podcast, we had Anil Godhawale on the show, the founder of the Expo. But Phil has worked his entire life, and he's a youngster still, but 20 years of experience in software, but also in advising and consulting those end user customers. So he has seen many industries, seen many users and references, and launched a platform which is called Glimpse of the Future, where he is giving a voice to those end users. And the next year, and Phil, we will talking about it next year, 10th of February 2022. Next episode, Glimpse of the Future. Stay tuned for any announcements by Phil. But that platform is giving people the voice to tell about the use cases, about the experiences, how project controls with people, processes, and tools in place help their business to grow or to be better in control. Phil, we've known each other for quite some while. Thank you very much for helping me out on this podcast.
It's totally an honor. It's a pleasure to follow Anil as well, because he's such a hero of mine. The dedication that he has in building his community, and it was so nice to celebrate with him, because this was the 10th year for Project Controls Expo, and for him to have that kind of turnout at Wembley Stadium with all of the fear and doubts around the pandemic, it's just wonderful. And So thank you for having me on. Now, a bit about 20 years of software industry. Try closer to 35, mate. I'm going to be 60 soon. And when I started in this before the 286 was released. But no, my background for the last 15 years is in planning and project control systems, particularly quantitative risk analysis type stuff. Yeah. So. A bit about Glimpse of the Future. We're all about the good news about what's working in our sector. And there's this common perception that projects always overrun radically and end up costing much more than they were expected to. And I was at an event talking to some friends of mine who also sell solutions into the capital project and infrastructure sector. And we were just talking about all the great successes that we knew of. And it just seemed to us that there was scope for telling the stories of what worked and why. And that's where we got started. We've had 13 Glimpse events so far. Got about 85 case studies on our YouTube channel now. And these are just 15-minute chunks where people are talking about the problem they faced, who the team were, what solution they embraced, and how they realized the return on investment in closing it out. Yep. And I think that the reason it's successful is because there's just so much skepticism in the market now, because there's so many solutions. You've got older people with know-how leaving the workforce trying to monetize what they've learned, and then you've got the software platforms that are easier than ever to develop upon. So, you put these two together, there's just this tsunami of innovation just washing over the market. And that's kind of the niche that we're in. We look for what we think are the very best case studies and help vendors to tell them more effectively. Yeah.
Well, and that's I think why Anil was of course an obvious guest on this show. You were an obvious guest, and it was really nice meeting you again last week in Wembley, where we say leading the project controls conversation. You glimpse in the future. Project controls is the next rock and roll. We are really showing that project controls is a profession. It's there to stay. The awareness is picking up more and more. It's about people. It's about processes. It's about tools. So that's where I think with your platform, with our podcast, with the exposition of Anil, which is such a great, it turned out into such a great event. We were talking about earlier. It's already 4 continents. He's growing to 5, 6, 7, 8 continent. It's a virtual one. Well, it's always good to be among friends again, to be among same-minded people. So Phil, can you tell me, so you walked in the Wembley Stadium last week, Tuesday morning probably. What was your first feeling about seeing all those people in this big event? It's the National Stadium. How did that feel to you on a professional level, on a project controls level? What was your first mind?
Aren't there so many stands here to go and find out about their solutions? I guess the first thing that I saw when I walked in that room was just the wealth of solutions that were there. I saw so many people that I knew and met so many new people with interesting things to offer.
And not really just on solution, I think.
No, that's the whole thing.
Yep.
The thing that set Project Control Expo apart is there's so many different types of exhibitors. You've got the best recruitment agencies. You've got the best owners agents. By that, I mean people who run projects on behalf of owners,
yep,
look after them. You've got the consultancies that specialize in large-scale delivery. You've got vendors that are emerging that are doing really advanced stuff with image processing and remote sensing and AI, and then of course the more mundane back end, building robust common data environments so that the all of the materials and all of the assets and all of the hundreds of thousands of things that go into these projects can be more tightly tracked and coordinated. It seems to me, I think that the most interesting trend about the market right now, I think for project controls, is it's turning into a logistics exercise. And I think the supply chain shortages are having a lot to do with that.
Yep.
Before, even traditionally, people looked at project controls and planning as a CPM network, a largely linked activity network for what's going to happen when.
Yep.
But what's happening now with logistics, advances in logistics, is that sometimes you can actually do things a lot earlier if you focus around the trades, if you focus on reducing the amount of time that you had delays built into the program to deliver things sooner. Yep. And logistics technology is really making a huge advances here.
Yeah, I think the span of what we try to call the project life cycle, and we talked about it earlier, is the project doesn't start when the first spade goes in the ground, but it starts when somebody has an idea. We need to build something, a new road, a new nuclear reactor, a new airport, etc. And that's I completely agree with you. The project life cycle is growing bigger and bigger. We start earlier, we stop later, operational management, etc. On the front end, logistics, lead times, etc. We all know what happened with the ship in the Peru Channel or in the Egyptian Channel. That's where that is going to be broadened. But also, I think, and I'm more than open to your opinion, we all started with scheduling. Everybody started with a CPM schedule, but now we're talking about risk, we're talking about resources, we're talking about AI, we're talking about digital twins. Also, the knowledge and the awareness on the profession of project controls is getting bigger and better.
Absolutely, yes, it's recognized now.
Yep, and it's not just by the new folks.
A great career, it's recognized as being mandatory in order to protect an owner's investment.
Yep.
And I like to believe that owners will step up and begin to build these competencies into their own organizations rather than just outsourcing that to consultancies the way that it's done now. But that's something I thought would happen over the last 5 years. And the owners' agents just get more and more powerful, I guess, because they're so good at it.
Yeah, well, it's their profession, but I really believe that the actual owner is getting more in control, and that's hopefully and probably also has to do with the proof which has been there for the last couple of years and maybe even decades by giving people a voice on, hey, this is what we did. We integrated scheduling with BIM, for example, or we integrated risk with cost, and this is what the return on investment at the end is in our project. So people are seeing proof that with the right controls in place, you don't have to be too late, you don't have to be too expensive, you don't have to be out of scope. I think people are getting more aware of project controls as a profession. And hey, I asked Anil this morning. There was an academy, a college on exhibiting on real formal education on PM. Yeah, so I really liked from a vendor perspective what has been shown. You know the whole industry, I guess. You have been talking to end users as well. What are your responses? What do you get back? Did the end user like this as well? Are the use cases presented also the voice of the community right now?
People like to hear about success. They like to hear about what worked and why. And we are all so time poor now. It's gone are the days that I think that most people can just let their interests wander and take them to look at 10, 15, 20 different vendors in order to determine whether the case studies that they have and the use cases that they talk about are going to match their requirements. It's just such a crowded and confused market out there that that there's definitely scope for those who can tell their stories in a succinct way and make a compelling case for how they delivered value. And that's what we're all about. You know, we see the presentation at the Glimpse event as being the key delivery milestone in a service that we offer, and helping people to distill their message into 15 minutes and then tell it as succinctly as possible and then reference it later.
Yep.
But to talk about the project controls industry more general, and BIM, the discussion that we had before, I think what's really fascinating now is, and what's changed is that planners now have access to repositories that will tell them about all of the components that are going to go into the project, and how much the original quotes were for those things, what the actual cost is, when it was promised to be delivered, when it's actually going to be delivered, how it's going to be delivered, where it's going to be held. You know, planners didn't have access to this level of information until just recently. And then you can look at things like remote sensing. You know, there's tools now that systems now that are tracking which bridges are going to be the weakest, which ones need repair soonest. You've got all sorts of fantastic GIS related applications. We're talking about drones that can be piloted remotely, and ones that
cranes,
are airplanes, you know, aerial surveys from airplanes that cover vast territories. So the amount of data that's available to project controls teams now to help them to advise the project director as to how things are going to shake out. It's just exponentially more data than just years ago. So how do you cut through all that? How do you make the best use of that? Because deriving insight from data, I think, is the big challenge right now.
Yeah, I've talked about it with several people. I think what we like to call in the Netherlands, but I think it's a common, the hockey curve effect, the hockey stick effect is growing. So we really get more aware. There is more data. Project intelligence, data intelligence is the new gold in projects, where the old planners and the old schedulers need to print out A0 papers, run against the plant, say, we opened up this valve and now it looks better or worse than we expected. And that's where remote sensoring and data, etc., will jump in its place and give the actual insight in the state of the project, in the state of the asset, deciding or giving the project manager insight to take corrective answers, corrective measurements, etc. So I really see that trend, more data, common data environment. Everybody's telling one single version of the truth. And remote working is here to stay, and not just because of the C word we all been talking about, but I've seen in the Rotterdam harbor there are people driving cranes not 100 feet up in the air, but after the desk with the joystick, etc. The same with drones, the same with rollies, etc. So I think that's a new gold we need to look into. So Phil, let's agree that in 10 years, and I was talking it with Anil, Have you got any idea or any vision on how is the project controls environment in 5 to 10 years? With your event, Glimpse of the Future, you should have been able to tell something about the future. What do you think in 2 or 3 sentences? Where are we in 5 years at that hockey stick?
Well, I think people are going to be crying out for simplicity. They're going to want to have different ways of looking at data that give them the full picture in a way that's easy to understand and communicate. In this business, the devil is in the detail.
Yep.
You can't oversimplify, but at the same time, being able to have a crisp overview of an entire project on one page. I'm a big fan of time change charts, for instance.
Yep.
Those types of metaphors, I think, are going to become increasingly valuable. The fact that Microsoft Power BI is now seeing such tremendous take-up, and almost every vendor is supporting that platform now.
Yep.
It's basically free, so that in and of itself is really driving the industry forward. I think the communities around project controls are going to become more valuable as well, because as more and more vendors flood onto the market, and we have a doubling in the number of solutions every couple of years, there's going to need to be a way to sift through this.
Yep.
And it's not going to slow down, because it's less expensive than ever before to develop software, and small teams can do great things with modern engineering platforms. Yep. So, yeah, it's
an interesting world to look at.
Well, I think that companies that are acquisitive in the project control sector, like Bentley Systems and Oracle, I know you didn't want me to mention those, but those are, and Think Project, these companies and Nemetschek in particular, those 4 companies that are quite aggressive in seeking out the best solutions and then acquiring them and bringing them into their framework so that they can offer a more robust solution. They're going to become increasingly powerful.
Yeah. I once heard a saying that people always say, if you are very small, you can't make impact. And then the guy in this story said, well, you've never been asleep with a mosquito in your room. So yes, there is this really big pool of traditional software vendors, but I also am looking at the challengers, and I think where the challengers can grow, they can learn from the mistakes, they can learn from the pitfalls everybody has been making. So I really believe that there's room enough, because the project controls market will grow massively. There's room enough for the big boys and the upcoming challengers
Can I add another point about what I think is going to happen in the future with project controls?
Yep.
I think there's going to be a lot more focus on mindset and bravery. Just helping teams to believe that the goal of the project is realizable when the inevitable change comes, right? So a friend of mine, he studies major projects, and he told me that a third of them fail, a third of them deliver
reasonably,
more or less on budget time, maybe over a bit, but a third of them are delivered brilliantly. So he went and he interviewed all of these directors of the projects that delivered on beautifully. And what he said separated them was the leadership. That when the project kicked off, they talked about the guiding light, the what's going to happen at the end, and got people to believe in that. And then what happens when the inevitable change comes, people don't retreat back into their tribes, into their joint venture companies trying to cover their butts.
Yep.
They pull together for the good of the project.
Yep.
And that's mindset. And that's also bravery is the other thing I want to talk about, because if you're in a project controls function, your role is to go and find the dirt, man. You are looking for the skeletons in the closet and trying to figure out how to tell the truth about what's actually happening on the project. And unfortunately, there aren't enough brave people out there, Paul. There aren't enough of them. There's people that say, well, you're paying me my salary and I'm going to produce your Gantt charts and I'm going to go home. It's about finding the problem and shining a light on it. I think that's one of the most important things that people in this function can do. So, people talk a lot about collaboration. I see that as a given. For me, it's mindset and bravery is what's going to really drive our industry.
Yeah, and I think to wrap up this call, we need to give those heroes a voice, and that can be done by the Project Controls Expo, because I think Anil is one of the brave guys to say, okay, let's rent the Wembley Stadium and give out the voice. You're also a very brave guy by putting in this glimpse of future. We are the new kid on the block, podcast number 12, I think we are recording right now, leading the Project Controls conversation. We want to bring me the heroes. I'll have them on the studio, give them a voice, and then we can do this any longer. Phil, I'm going to see you 10th of February on your Glimpse of the event. Hopefully sooner, maybe not, maybe so. I don't know where the world is going at the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much, Phil Shatz, founder of the Glimpse of the Future platform. Thank you for being on the show, Phil.
No, it was a pleasure and honor to be invited and to follow Anil. I mean, he's a god amongst men. He is the risks he's taken and what he's built. You know, well, I just really admire him a lot. And thank you, Paul.
Yeah, more than welcome, Phil, and talk to you soon.
Ciao, bye now.
Yes,
bye.
cheers.
Bye, Paul, thanks.
So thank you for that, Phil Shatz, Glimpse of the Future. We'll see each other in February. And if you find the podcast, PROCON podcast, very interesting, please subscribe, etc. at proconpodcast.com. Read one of our blogs, but I think Glimpse of Your Future is also something very interesting to see. I don't know if it's still free of charge to look at it, but take a look at this website, Glimpse of Future. Probably you'll find it on Google, and otherwise the link will be on this page. Thank you very much, Phil. So. Closing up this podcast, so we're talking about the Project Controls Exposition UK 2021. A lot of use cases have been presented, and I picked out 2 or 3 which are very interesting. There were a lot of guys, so I've been at a use case where people are looking at S-curves in a Power BI add-in. I've been looking at probabilistic planning in different solutions, so within OPC, within Safran Risk, within other solutions. There have been tracks about how to get your on-prem perpetual license into the cloud by this managed hosting platform, for example. I've been talking to these real nice guys, and I'm going to try to get them on the podcast later on. It's the London College of Project Controls, London Metropolitan College of Project Controls, who have a formal education, and that's what we are lacking in the Netherlands on project controls. There are consulting firms, there are staffing firms. I think it's more than 100 exhibitants in this Wembley Stadium. It's a big event. You have the sense of that right now. We are going to be back. We are going to be back in the UK, but also virtual. As Anil was telling this morning, they changed the entrance to partner showcases more easy, to be less of a hurdle to get into that. It's virtual, it's physical, it's you can go there, you can watch online. That's the new way of working, I think. But in overview, and my colleagues are agreeing with me because we were there with a couple of colleagues and friends. The project controls community is growing, and it's growing because it has more relevance right now. It has proven the return on investment. The old cliche of a project being too late, too expensive is no longer valid. Phil was saying in major projects, 30% are right on time, right in budget. Well, of course, there's always a small portion which is later by accidents or by incidents that can occur, of course. But there's also, and maybe by the heroes or by the leaders in this case, 20, 30, 40% of major capital projects are run under budget, closer than finishing time, in time or earlier, within the scope, within the risks, within the resource management, etc. So those heroes, please report podcast@primanet.com. I really want you on the show. We want to give you the voice. We want to lead the project controls conversation. We want to give you the glimpse in the future. Project Controls is the new rock and roll in this case, and that's why the 3 guests of today, including myself, are very connected to each other. We want to drive the awareness on project control. So if you are interested by that, If you want to participate actively, please reach out to the website, podcast@primanet.com. Send me an email with your use case, and I'm more than happy to have you here physically on the show, virtually on the show. I can come to you whatever is needed at the end, but also read into the articles we are posting regularly. So a final, subscribe to the channel you want. Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever platform you are using, it's open. Just search for PROCON podcast, and you see one of the 12, 13 events we have right now, and it will continue for at least a couple of months or hopefully a couple of years, depending on the input. If you subscribe on this page, there's a subscribe. You'll always get an email on the new episode. Please stay tuned. Listen back to the other because this is a very interesting, but the business intelligence from 2 weeks ago, or the nuclear reactor from 8 weeks ago, or the metropole region from 14 weeks ago are also very interesting use cases to show and to see. For now, I'm going to say thank you very much for listening. Have a safe day, have a safe week, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for staying tuned. Subscribe and listen in and tune in, and hope to see you next time. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the PROCON podcast. To listen and watch more episodes, you can subscribe and access the resources mentioned in this episode by visiting proconpodcast.com. We look forward to seeing you on our next episode, where we will continue to lead the project controls conversation. The PROCON podcast and the associated resources is published under copyright to PrimaNed. All rights reserved, no reproduction of this content is permitted.